The Laughing Lotus Comedy Club was having its biggest night of the year. Every red velvet seat was filled. The amber stage lights were perfectly dimmed, and the air buzzed with anticipation and the crisp scent of overpriced cocktails. On stage, Emma Walsh adjusted the microphone stand, her dark curls bouncing as she leaned forward. "So, I dated this guy who kept calling himself a self-made man." She paused, timing perfect as the audience leaned in. Which was accurate, I guess. His personality was definitely homemade, like when a 5-year-old makes you a birthday cake. Sweet intention, terrible execution. The audience erupted in laughter, all except for one man seated in the VIP section. Blake Sterling, tech mogul and Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, sat stone-faced, his crystal tumbler of whiskey raised halfway to his lips. He hadn't come for the comedy. He'd come because the Laughing Lotus was next on his list of prime Manhattan real estate acquisitions. The fact that he was actually having to sit through amateur hour was already testing his limited patience. Emma continued her set, riding the wave of audience energy. Speaking of rich guys, did you know billionaires have a special cologne? It's called Eau d'Entitlement, notes of tax evasion with a subtle hint of, "My yacht is bigger than yours." More laughter cascaded through the room. Blake's jaw tightened. His companion for the evening, a willowy blonde whose name he'd already forgotten, tittered politely beside him. "What's really fascinating," Emma went on, scanning the crowd, "is how they all have the same expression. Like they're perpetually smelling something bad, but they own the factory that produces it." She mimicked the look, nose slightly crinkled, eyes half-lidded with disdain. Someone in the audience called out, "Like that guy right there," pointing directly at Blake. The spotlight swung suddenly, finding Blake Sterling's face in the crowd. The room hushed momentarily, then exploded with laughter as recognition dawned. Blake Sterling was notoriously photogenic, his face a fixture in business magazines and society pages. Tonight, caught mid-sip with that exact expression Emma had just mocked, he looked exactly like her caricature. Emma's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't planned this, but a professional never wastes an opportunity. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a live specimen. Sir, are you lost? The How to High Five Without Appearing Common workshop is down the street." The audience roared. Blake felt heat rising to his face, something that hadn't happened since boarding school. Cameras flashed as people recognized him. Within seconds, he knew his humiliation would be trending on social media. "I'm so sorry," Emma continued with mock sympathy. "Was that too much? Let me dial it back to language. Billionaires understand. Your emotional portfolio is showing significant downward trends. Perhaps diversify into having an actual personality?" Blake stood abruptly, his 6'3" frame looming. The room stilled. For 3 excruciating seconds, everyone held their breath. Then he smiled, the cold, calculated smile that had preceded the downfall of numerous business rivals, dropped a $1,000 bill on the table, and walked out. His date scrambled after him, high heels clicking frantically across the floor. Outside in the cool Manhattan night, Blake's driver already had the door to the Bentley open. Once inside, Blake pulled out his phone. "Stevens," he said when his assistant answered. "Find out everything about the Laughing Lotus Comedy Club and the comedian, Emma something." "Walsh, sir. Emma Walsh. She's actually quite popular on, I don't care if she's the queen of comedy, by that club." "Sir, it's not currently for..." "Make an offer they can't refuse and start opposition research on Walsh. I want to know everything. Weaknesses, debts, dreams. Find out what matters to her." "May I ask why, sir?" Blake gazed out at the glittering New York skyline, a city that had always bent to his will. "Because Stevens. Nobody makes Blake Sterling the punchline. Nobody." As the Bentley glided uptown, Blake's mind was already calculating. He'd built an empire by identifying what people valued most, then taking it away unless they played by his rules. Emma Walsh would learn that some jokes come with consequences. What Blake couldn't have known was that Emma had just stepped off, stage to a notification that her comedy special had been picked up by a major streaming service, a deal she'd been working toward her entire career. And as the universe's greatest cosmic joke, the streaming service was one of the few companies Blake Sterling didn't own or influence. A collision course had been set between two forces: a man unaccustomed to humiliation and a woman whose entire career was built on fearlessly speaking truth to power. Only one could have the last laugh. "You did what?" Zoe Palmer's voice echoed through Emma's cramped Brooklyn apartment, causing her tabby cat Chaplin to dart under the sofa. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the countless sticky notes that covered Emma's refrigerator, each bearing a joke idea or observation. "I didn't know it was Blake Sterling," Emma groaned, scrolling through her phone where Arn Sterling Burn was trending. "It was just some stuck-up guy with the exact expression I was describing. The universe handed me the perfect setup." Zoe, Emma's best friend and manager, paced the small kitchen. "The universe handed you Blake Sterling. Blake, I eat small businesses for breakfast. Sterling, the man owns half of Manhattan and has lawyers who have lawyers." "Well, technically, I handed him his ass," Emma quipped, then winced as she saw a particularly unflattering screenshot of Blake's face mid-humiliation. "Look, it'll blow over. Rich guys have thin skin but short memories when it comes to little people like me." Zoe wasn't convinced. "Emma, this isn't just any rich guy. He once bankrupted a restaurant chain because a waiter brought him sparkling water instead of still." "That's an urban legend." "Is it, though?" Zoe raised an eyebrow. "My cousin works in finance. Sterling's scorched earth reputation isn't exaggerated." Emma's phone chimed with an email notification. "Hold that apocalyptic thought. That's my agent." Her eyes widened as she read. "Zoe, they're offering me a primetime slot at the Montreal Comedy Festival." "This is huge! That's amazing!" Zoe exclaimed, momentarily forgetting their Sterling problem. "Wait, aren't they owned by—" "Nope, independently run. Even Sterling can't touch them." Emma grinned, reaching for her coffee mug emblazoned with, "I'm not insulting you, I'm describing you." See? The universe balances itself out. Across town in his penthouse suite at Sterling Tower, Blake was in his personal gym, punishing a boxing bag with precise, powerful jabs. Each hit released a fraction of the fury that had been building since last night. His personal trainer counted respectfully from a distance, knowing better than to interrupt when Blake was in this mood. "Sir." Stevens appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "I have the information you requested." Blake delivered one final punishing blow to the bag. "Walk with me." As they moved through the sleek, minimalist penthouse toward Blake's home office, Stevens rattled off details. Emma Walsh, 29, born in Boston, Northwestern University dropout. Been doing stand-up for 8 years with an increasingly strong following. Lives in Brooklyn, has a cat named after Charlie Chaplin. No romantic attachments we can find. "Financial vulnerabilities?" Blake asked, grabbing a towel. "Student loans, though she's been making regular payments. The comedy club, the laughing. Lotus is owned by one Marcus Jenkins. It's not for sale, but everyone has a price. Jenkins has a daughter in an expensive private school and a son starting college next year." Blake nodded, absorbing the information as he settled behind his glass desk. "And what about her career prospects?" Stevens hesitated. "That's complicated. She just signed a deal with Horizon Streaming for a comedy special. It's her big break." "Horizon?" Blake's expression darkened. Horizon was one of the few major entertainment companies he had no leverage with. They were owned by the reclusive Winters family, who famously refused to do business with him after a hostile takeover attempt years ago. "Yes, sir, and there's more. The video of last night is going viral. Her social media following has jumped 40% overnight." Blake stared out at the Manhattan skyline, his domain. He'd built his empire by identifying exactly what pressure points would make opponents fold. Emma Walsh had emerged unscathed from his initial strategy. In fact, she was benefiting. He would need a more personal approach. Cancel my meetings for the afternoon and get me a ticket to her next show. Sir? Are you sure that's not under my name, obviously? Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. And Stevens, find out who handles PR for Horizon Streaming. I want to make them an offer for exclusive promotion of Walsh's special. Stevens looked confused. You want to help promote her special? Know your enemy, Stevens. Sometimes the best way to control a fire is to contain it first, then cut off its oxygen. Blake reached for his phone. Also, send flowers to the Laughing Lotus. Anonymous. With a card that says, Unforgettable Performance. That evening, Emma arrived at the Laughing Lotus for her regular Tuesday slot to find the place buzzing with excitement. Marcus Jenkins, the owner, pulled her aside the moment she walked in. Girl, what did you do? We're sold out for the next month. I've had to hire extra security to manage the line. Emma blinked in surprise. All because I roasted some rich jerk? Not just any rich jerk, Marcus laughed. Blake Sterling, do you know how many comedians would kill for that kind of publicity? As Emma made her way to the green room, she noticed an enormous arrangement of exotic flowers on the counter. Someone's popular, she remarked to the bartender. Came this afternoon. Anonymous, he replied, handing her the card. Unforgettable Performance. Emma read, a small shiver running down her spine despite the warm room. Hours later, Emma was mid-set, riding the energy of the largest crowd the Laughing Lotus had ever seen. So, a lot of you probably saw that video, she acknowledged to whoops and applause. Listen, I feel bad. I didn't set out to embarrass anyone. Rich people have feelings too. They're just usually limited to smug and smugger. The audience roared with laughter, except for one person sitting at the back, baseball cap pulled low. Blake Sterling watched intently, studying Emma's timing, her crowd work, the way she constructed jokes. He'd built his fortune by understanding systems, how they worked, how they could be manipulated. Comedy was just another system, and Emma Walsh was its algorithm personified. What he hadn't expected was to find himself actually laughing, genuinely, at one of her jokes about dating apps. It was a strange sensation, like discovering a muscle he'd forgotten he had. As the show ended and the crowd dispersed, Blake slipped out unnoticed. In the back of his Bentley, he made a call. Jenkins agreed to meet tomorrow, Stevens informed him. Good. And Horizon Streaming? They're interested in your promotional offer. The CEO wants to know why you're suddenly interested in comedy. Blake watched the city lights blur past his window. Tell them I've recently developed an appreciation for the art form. Sometimes the most unexpected things capture our attention. And as Emma packed up her notes backstage, her phone pinged with a notification. An anonymous donation had been made to her student loan account, paying off the entire balance. The attached message read simply, I always pay for quality entertainment. Emma stared at her bank account balance for the 5th time that morning, the impossible number still displayed on her phone screen. Her student loans, all $87,132 or 16 of them, had been paid in full. The mysterious benefactor remained anonymous despite her increasingly frantic calls to the loan servicer. They can't just refuse to tell me who paid my debt, Emma argued, pacing around her apartment while her cat Chaplin watched with judgmental eyes. Actually, they can, Zoe replied, sprawled on Emma's worn couch. Privacy laws. Someone wants to do something nice anonymously. They're protected. Nice? Emma stopped pacing. Zoe, nobody drops $87,000 as a thank you for jokes. This is weird. It's creepy. It's suspicious timing, Zoe finished, sitting up straighter. Especially with this. She held up her tablet displaying a news headline. Sterling Entertainment Ventures announces major promotional partnership with Horizon Streaming. Emma snatched the tablet. Sterling Entertainment? As in Blake Sterling? She quickly skimmed the article. This doesn't make sense. Why would he promote the streaming service that's producing my special? Zoe's expression darkened. Keep reading. Emma scrolled down to find a quote from Sterling himself. We're excited to bring fresh comedic voices to wider audiences. In particular, we're looking forward to helping emerging talents like Emma Walsh reach their full potential. Their full potential? Emma's voice rose an octave. What does that even mean? And since when does he care about comedy? Since you humiliated him publicly, Zoe said grimly. Emma, he's not promoting you. He's controlling you. Classic corporate takeover strategy. If you can't destroy it, own it. Emma collapsed onto the couch beside her friend. So what do I do? Tell Horizon to reject his money? That's millions in. Promotion I'd be turning down. No, Zoe said, grabbing her purse. We go directly to the source. You have a meeting at Sterling Tower in an hour. I what? I called in every favor I had. His assistant agreed to a 15-minute slot in his schedule. Zoe pulled out a garment bag. And you're not going in those sweatpants. Put this on. An hour later, Emma stood in the gleaming lobby of Sterling Tower, feeling like an imposter. In the sleek blazer and pencil skirt Zoe had forced her into, the security guard checked her ID against a list. Ms. Walsh, 52nd floor. Mr. Sterling's assistant will meet you. The elevator ride gave Emma time to rehearse what she would say. Confront him about the loans? Ask about the Horizon deal? Tell him to back off? By the time the doors slid open with a soft chime, she had settled on dignified outrage with a side of withering sarcasm. Ms. Walsh. A meticulously dressed man with rimless glasses greeted her. I'm Stevens. Mr. Sterling is finishing another meeting. Please follow me. Stevens led her through a maze of glass-walled offices, where immaculately dressed professionals moved with purposeful efficiency. Everything gleamed with wealth and power, the antithesis of the gritty comedy clubs where Emma felt at home. Wait here, Stevens instructed, showing her into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Would you like anything? Water? Coffee? Answers would be nice, Emma replied with a tight smile. Stephen's expression remained professionally neutral. Mr. Sterling will be with you shortly. He disappeared, leaving Emma alone with the spectacular view and her mounting anxiety. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Emma's initial nervousness had transformed into irritation by the time the door finally opened. But instead of Blake Sterling, an elegant older woman entered, her silver hair styled in a chic bob, her navy suit impeccably tailored. Ms. Walsh, I'm Victoria Sterling. She extended a manicured hand. Blake's mother. Emma blinked in surprise. It's nice to meet you. I was actually scheduled to meet with Blake. Yes, but he's been unavoidably detained. Victoria gestured. To the chairs. Please, sit. I understand you've had some interactions with my son recently. Emma tensed. If you're here to threaten me with lawyers or... To her surprise, Victoria laughed. A warm, genuine sound. My dear, if I threatened everyone who put Blake in his place occasionally, I'd have no time for anything else. She studied Emma with shrewd eyes. He told me what happened at your comedy club. What he didn't tell me, but what I suspect, is that he was impressed. Impressed? Emma scoffed. He's trying to buy my comedy club and take over my streaming. Deal. That doesn't sound like admiration. Victoria smiled enigmatically. Blake has always had unusual ways of showing interest. Even as a child, he'd pull the pigtails of girls he liked. I'm not a playground crush, Mrs. Sterling. I'm a professional. Comedian whose career is suddenly being manipulated by a billionaire with an ego problem. Call me Victoria, please. And believe me, I understand. She leaned forward, her expression sincere. My son has many admirable qualities, but he's never learned to handle rejection or humiliation gracefully. When you made him the butt of your joke, quite deservedly I might add, you did something few people have ever done. You surprised him. Before Emma could respond, the door opened again, and Blake Sterling himself strode in. He froze momentarily at the sight of his mother. "Mother? What are you doing here?" His eyes darted between Victoria and Emma. "Just getting acquainted with Ms. Walsh while you were dealing with Tokyo," Victoria replied smoothly, standing. "I was telling her about your childhood habit of collecting bugs, how you were always fascinated by creatures that could survive despite being stepped on." Blake's jaw tightened. "I thought we agreed you'd stop sharing childhood stories with people I do business with." "Is that what we're doing?" Emma asked, finding her voice. "Business. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like elaborate revenge." Blake finally fixed his gaze on Emma, and she was struck by how much more intense his eyes were in person. Steel blue with flecks of gray, like a storm gathering over water. "Revenge would be shutting down your comedy club and blacklisting you from every venue in New York," he said coolly. "I'm offering you a multi-million-dollar promotional campaign for your special. After paying off my student loans without my permission," Emma countered. A flicker of surprise crossed Blake's face before his expression smoothed back to neutral. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Victoria watched this exchange with barely concealed amusement. "Well, this has been delightful, but I have a charity luncheon." She kissed Blake's cheek. "Don't forget dinner on Sunday. And do bring Ms. Walsh if she's available. I think your father would find her refreshing." With that parting bombshell, she swept out of the room. An awkward silence fell. Blake moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "My mother has an overactive imagination," he said finally, "and a misguided belief that I need socializing like a reluctant house cat." Despite herself, Emma laughed. "Did you just compare yourself to a cat?" The corner of Blake's mouth twitched upward. "I was thinking more along the lines of a jaguar, but yes, funny. I was thinking wounded cobra." "Because I strike back? Because you're flashy, dangerous, and probably compensating for something." Their eyes locked, the air between them suddenly charged with something beyond antagonism. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Blake broke the silence first. "I watched your full set last night. Not just the viral clip. You're genuinely talented." Emma hadn't expected that. "Thank you, I think." "It's not a compliment. It's an observation," Blake replied. "I don't waste time on mediocrity, which brings me to why you're here." "Actually, I invited myself. Your assistant just gave in to shut me up." Blake almost smiled. Almost. "Stevens doesn't give in to anyone without my approval. I wanted to meet with you, Ms. Walsh." "Emma," she corrected automatically, then wondered why she was on a first-name basis with her nemesis. "Emma," he repeated, and something about the way her name sounded in his deep voice made her stomach flip unexpectedly. "I have a proposition for you. If it involves selling my soul or doing corporate gigs for your hedge fund buddies, I'll pass." "Nothing so pedestrian." Blake returned to the conference table, sitting across from her. "I want to understand comedy. Real comedy, not the sanitized corporate entertainment I usually encounter, and you're going to teach me." Emma stared at him. "You want comedy lessons? From me? Why?" "Sterling Entertainment is expanding into content creation. Comedy is a valuable sector I know little about. Consider it a consulting arrangement." "And if I refuse?" Something dangerous flashed in Blake's eyes. "I don't think you will. You're too curious. About me. About this world." He gestured to the gleaming tower around them. "About why someone like me would be interested in someone like you. That's presumptuous." "It's accurate," You build your comedy on observation. Right now, you're dying to observe the natural habitat of the billionaire up close. Material like that is priceless. He was right, and Emma hated that he was right. The comedian in her was already cataloging details, the subtle scent of his cologne, the perfect three-point fold of his pocket square, the way power seemed to radiate from him like heat from pavement in summer. One session, she found herself saying. Then we reevaluate. Blake extended his hand. Deal. When Emma took it, his grip was firm but not domineering. The brief contact sent an unexpected current up her arm, and from the slight widening of his eyes, she suspected he felt it too. As Stevens escorted her back to the elevator, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Well, did you tell him off? Emma stared at the message, unsure how to explain what had just happened. How could she tell Zoe that instead of confronting her enemy, she'd somehow agreed to spend more time with him? Or that the prospect filled her with a confusing mixture of dread and anticipation? The elevator doors closed, whisking her down from Blake Sterling's rarefied world back to reality. But as the floors ticked by, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just veered wildly off script into uncharted territory. A comedian's worst nightmare and greatest opportunity rolled into one. Meanwhile, 50 floors above, Blake stood at his window watching Emma's tiny figure exit his building and disappear into the crowded Manhattan streets. His phone rang. Marcus Jenkins from the Laughing Lotus. Mr. Sterling, I've reconsidered your offer for the club. Blake's expression remained impassive. I'm afraid that offer has been withdrawn, Mr. Jenkins. Withdrawn? But you said, circumstances have changed. Good day. Blake ended the call and turned to find Stevens watching him curiously. Cancel the opposition research on Walsh. And tell the Horizon team I want to be personally involved in the promotional strategy for her special. Of course, sir, Stevens replied carefully. May I ask what changed? Blake straightened his already perfect tie, a habit from his boarding school days when he needed time to choose his words. Nothing's changed, he said finally. I'm still going to disrupt Emma Walsh's carefully constructed world. I'm just going to do it in a way she won't see coming. But as Stevens departed, Blake found himself replaying the brief moment when their hands had touched, an unexpected connection that had nothing to do with business strategies or revenge. For the first time in years, Blake Sterling, master of calculated moves, had made a decision on impulse. And it both terrified and exhilarated him. He wants to what? Zoe nearly choked on her latte. They sat in a secluded corner of Grounded, a Brooklyn coffee shop frequented by artists and writers. The exposed brick walls and mismatched vintage furniture couldn't be further from the sleek minimalism of Sterling Tower. It was Emma's sanctuary, a place where she often came to write jokes or simply observe the parade of humanity that provided her best material. Learn about comedy, from me. Emma shredded a napkin into tiny pieces as she spoke. He claims it's for business research. And you believe that? Zoe arched an eyebrow skeptically. The man who tried to buy your comedy club and mysteriously paid off your loans just wants comedy lessons? Emma sighed. I know how it sounds. It sounds like a wolf asking Little Red Riding Hood for directions to Grandma's house. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Emma muttered. Honey, this isn't about confidence. Zoe leaned forward, her expression serious. It's about who Blake Sterling is. The man has a reputation for getting what he wants by any means necessary. There are stories. Urban legends, Emma corrected. Fine. But answer me this. Why? Did you agree? Emma stared into her coffee, avoiding Zoe's piercing gaze. The truth was complicated. Part of her, the pragmatic, self-preserving part, recognized that keeping Blake close meant she could monitor whatever game he was playing. Another part, the comedian always hungry for material, couldn't resist the opportunity to explore the rarefied world of the ultra-wealthy. But there was something else. Something she was reluctant to admit even to herself. the unexpected spark she'd felt when their eyes had locked across his conference table. The strange electric current that had passed between them when they shook hands. "Professional curiosity," she finally said. "Plus, having a billionaire investor interested in my special could change everything for my career. I'd be an idiot to shut that door." Zoe studied her friend's face. "Just be careful, Em. Men like Sterling don't experience consequences the way normal people do. When they play games, other people get hurt." "I'm not exactly defenseless." Emma straightened her shoulders. "My entire career is built on reading people and finding their vulnerabilities. If anyone should be worried, it's him." Before Zoe could respond, Emma's phone chimed with a text message. She glanced down, then did a double take at the name displayed on her screen. "It's him. He wants to meet tonight, at the Laughing Lotus, during my set." "Of course he does," Zoe muttered. "Home field advantage for you." "Or he wants to see me in my natural habitat," Emma mused. "Like I'm some rare species he's studying." Just remember who's the predator and who's the prey in this scenario. Emma looked up from her phone with a determined smile. "Who says, I can't be both?" The Laughing Lotus was packed again that night, the crowd energy electric with anticipation. Since the viral moment with Blake Sterling, Emma's profile had skyrocketed. Tonight's audience was a strange mix of her regular fans, curious newcomers drawn by the viral video, and, most disconcertingly, several sharp-suited men and women who screamed corporate with every fiber of their designer clothing. "Sterling's people," Marcus Jenkins explained as Emma peeked through the curtain. "They've been coming all week, taking notes. I think they're studying the audience demographics or something." "Great," Emma sighed. "Nothing kills comedy like being dissected by marketing analysts." In the cramped backstage area that served as the Laughing Lotus's green room, Emma reviewed her notes one last time. She'd prepared new material, careful to avoid any direct references to Blake Sterling. Whatever game they were playing, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of thinking he occupied her thoughts. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. 5 minutes, Emma," called the stage manager. She took a deep breath, rolled her shoulders, and went through her pre-show ritual. 3 jumping jacks, a swig of water, and her personal mantra whispered under her breath. Truth, then laughter. It was something her father, a failed comedian turned postal worker, had taught her before he died. Find the truth of a situation, then find the humor in that truth. It had never steered her wrong. When she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinded her. As her eyes adjusted, she scanned the room, searching for one particular face. There, in the back corner, partially obscured by shadow but unmistakable, sat Blake Sterling. Unlike his previous incognito visit, he made no attempt to hide tonight. He wore no baseball cap, no casual disguise. Instead, he sat with the confident posture of a man who owned the room, which, given his wealth, he theoretically could. What struck Emma most, however, was that he was alone. No entourage, no date, no assistants hovering nearby. Just Blake Sterling, watching her with those intense steel blue eyes. She launched into her set, determined not to let his presence throw her. For 20 minutes, she held the audience in the palm of her hand, weaving stories about dating disasters, subway encounters, and the peculiarities of New York life. The laughter rolled in waves, building and cresting exactly where she intended. Then came the moment where she typically would interact with the audience. Usually she picked someone in the front rows, easier to establish rapport, safer territory. Tonight, however, she found herself saying, "So, we have some newcomers tonight, including," her eyes fixed directly on Blake, "a gentleman in the back who's here to study comedy like it's a rare bacterial strain." The audience turned, following her gaze. A murmur of recognition rippled through the crowd as people spotted Blake Sterling. "Don't worry, folks. He's not here to buy. The place, I checked." Emma paused for the laugh. He's here because apparently being worth billions doesn't automatically make you funny. Though it does make you think you're funny, which might be the richest joke of all. To her surprise, Blake smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile she'd seen at their first encounter, but something that seemed almost genuine. He raised his whiskey glass in a small salute, acknowledging the hit. Encouraged, Emma continued, "I've been asked to teach him about comedy. Me, teaching a billionaire." She shook her head in mock disbelief. "It's like asking a sewer rat to explain fine dining to a food critic. But apparently I have something he can't buy. Timing." More laughter, and Blake's smile widened slightly. He was enjoying this, she realized with surprise, enjoying being the target of her jokes. "The thing about comedy," she continued, shifting from direct address to a more contemplative tone, "is that it's rooted in vulnerability. To be funny, you have to be willing to reveal your insecurities, your failures, your most embarrassing moments. You have to be human." She paused, eyes still locked with Blake's. "And that's probably the hardest lesson for some people to learn." Something flickered across Blake's expression. A moment of unguarded reaction that vanished so quickly, Emma almost thought she'd imagined it. But the comedian in her recognized it instantly. She'd struck a nerve. She finished her set to thunderous applause, riding the high that only a perfect performance could bring. As she took her final bow, she saw Blake stand and make his way toward the backstage door, moving with the confident grace of someone who never worried about being stopped. By the time she returned to the green room, he was waiting for her, leaning against the wall with casual elegance that somehow managed to make the shabby space look like it was unworthy of him, rather than the other way around. "That was quite the performance," he said, straightening as she entered. "Especially the part where you compared me to a bacterial strain." "Technically, I said you were studying comedy like a bacterial strain," Emma corrected, reaching for a bottle of water. "But if the petri dish fits..." A hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You were right, you know." "About what part? Your God complex? Your inability to take a joke? The fact that you probably have a swimming pool filled with $100 bills? About vulnerability?" His voice had lost its usual sharp edge. "It is the hardest lesson for some people to learn." Emma paused, surprised by the unexpected candor. For a brief moment, Blake Sterling seemed almost human. "Well," she said, unsure how to respond to this version of him. "That's your first homework assignment then. Vulnerability." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Homework? I thought we were having a lesson tonight." This was the lesson. Emma gestured toward the stage. "Observation. The foundation of comedy is watching and listening. Before you speak, you need to understand what makes people laugh before you can make them laugh. And what makes people laugh, Ms. Walsh? Recognition. When they see their own experiences reflected back at them in a way that highlights the absurdity." She studied him curiously. "Though I'm not sure how much the average person has in common with Blake Sterling." "You'd be surprised," he said quietly. Then, as if catching himself revealing too much, he straightened and checked his watch. "I have a dinner reservation at Per Se. Join me." It wasn't a question, and Emma bristled at the presumption. "I have plans." "Cancel them." "Has anyone ever told you that commands aren't actually invitations?" Blake looked genuinely perplexed, as if the concept had never occurred to him. "I don't usually have to invite people to things. They just want to come." Despite herself, Emma laughed. "Wow, that must be quite the bubble you live in." "Is that a no?" "It's a try again with less entitlement." Blake considered this for a moment. Then, to her astonishment, he inclined his head slightly. "Emma Walsh, would you do me the honor of joining me for dinner at Percy this evening? I find your perspective refreshing, and I would like to continue our conversation in a setting more conducive to dialogue than a comedy club green room that smells faintly of desperation and cheap beer." Emma bit back a smile. "Well, When you put it that charming way, how could a girl refuse? But I can't do per se. I have a show at the Comedy Cellar in an hour. Cancel it. There's that commanding tone again. Emma shook her head. I don't bail on commitments, even for billionaires. Especially for billionaires. Instead of looking irritated, Blake seemed intrigued by her refusal, as if he were a scientist observing an unexpected reaction in an experiment. What time do you finish? Around midnight. Perfect. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. I know a place that serves the best late-night food in the city. I'll have a car waiting for you after your show. Emma hesitated. Dinner with Blake Sterling, alone, late at night, felt like stepping into territory far more dangerous than she'd anticipated. But curiosity, and something else she wasn't ready to name, pushed her forward. Fine, but I'm choosing the place. Blake pocketed his phone, his expression unreadable. As you wish. The phrase hung in the air between them, oddly intimate. Emma felt her cheeks warm and cursed her fair complexion that always betrayed her emotions. I should get ready for my next show, she said, breaking the moment. Blake nodded and moved toward the door. One more thing, he said, pausing in the doorway. That joke about the swimming pool of $100 bills? Inaccurate. It would be incredibly impractical. The chlorine would ruin the paper. With that deadpan delivery, he was gone, leaving Emma staring after him in surprise, and with the disconcerting realization that Blake Sterling might actually have a sense of humor after all. At precisely 12:03 a.m., Emma emerged from the Comedy Cellar to find a sleek black Bentley idling at the curb. The chauffeur stepped out immediately to open the rear door. Inside sat Blake Sterling, his tie loosened and jacket removed, the closest thing to casual she'd seen from him. Good show? He asked, as she slid into the buttery leather seat beside him. Decent. The late crowd is always a little more lubricated. She handed a slip of paper to the driver. This address, please. Blake raised an eyebrow but didn't comment, as the car pulled away from the curb and headed uptown. So, Emma said, acutely aware of how small the back seat suddenly felt with his large frame beside her. Learn anything from watching my set tonight? Several things, Blake replied. You use your own insecurities as armor. By exposing your vulnerabilities first, you control the narrative. It's an interesting defensive strategy. Emma blinked, taken aback by his insight. That's surprisingly perceptive. I didn't build a global empire by being oblivious to human nature. No, I suppose you built it by exploiting human nature. To her surprise, Blake chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his face. For a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of what he might have been like before wealth and power had calcified around him like a protective shell. You really don't pull your punches, do you? It's kind of my job description. Refreshing, he murmured, almost to himself. Most people around me are too afraid to speak truth to power. Maybe that's why you have no sense of humor, Emma suggested. No one's ever laughed at you before. My mother would disagree. She finds me hilarious. Unintentionally, of course. I liked her, Emma admitted. She seems real. Too real sometimes. Blake gazed out the window as the city lights played across his chiseled features. She never bought into the trappings of wealth the way my father did. Keeps us all accountable in her own way. The car slowed, then stopped in front of a nondescript building in the East Village. The driver looked dubiously at the neighborhood, through the windshield. We're here, Emma announced cheerfully. Blake peered out at the graffiti-covered exterior and faded awning. This is your choice for late-night dining? Disappointed? Were you expecting Per se's secret midnight menu? I was expecting somewhere with health department approval. Emma laughed. Trust me, Sterling. You haven't lived until you've had Veselka's pierogi at 1 a.m. Something shifted in Blake's expression. A softening, a curiosity. Lead the way, Ms. Walsh. Inside, the Ukrainian diner buzzed with late-night energy, a mix of club-goers sobering up, night shift workers refueling, and insomniacs seeking comfort food. The hostess, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, didn't bat an eye at Emma's arrival with a man in what was clearly a $5,000 suit. "Your usual booth, Emma?" she asked, grabbing 2 menus. "Thanks, Irina. And coffee. Please. Both of us." They slid into a worn vinyl booth in the corner. Blake looked around, taking in the surroundings with the careful observation of an anthropologist in unfamiliar territory. "You come here often?" he asked. "At least once a week. Best 24-hour comfort food in the city." Emma handed him a menu. "And before you ask, yes, I'm sure they have sparkling water for your delicate billionaire palate." Blake ignored the jab, studying the menu with surprising intensity. "What do you recommend?" "Potato pierogi with extra sour cream. And the borscht. Life-changing." When the waitress arrived, Emma ordered in her usual confident manner. Then, to her astonishment, Blake said, "I'll have what she's having," with a hint of challenge in his eyes. As they waited for their food, an awkward silence fell between them, 2 people from different worlds, suddenly aware of the vast gulf separating their experiences. "So," Emma said finally, "what made you decide you needed comedy lessons? Besides my apparently devastating takedown of your facial expressions." Blake considered the question, his fingers absently tracing patterns on the laminated tabletop. "I told you. Sterling Entertainment is expanding into content creation." "Right, the business explanation." Emma leaned forward. "Now try the real one." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, Emma thought he might actually tell her the truth. Then the coffee arrived, breaking the tension. "You know," Blake said, wrapping his long fingers around the mug, "most people would be intimidated sitting across from me, yet you seem determined to provoke me at every turn." "I'm not most people." Clearly. His gaze was assessing, almost admiring. "You know what I think, Emma Walsh? I think you're as calculating as I am. You've built your career on seeming authentic while carefully controlling what parts of yourself you reveal." Emma felt a flash of indignation, then a deeper discomfort at how accurately he'd read her. "That's rich, coming from the man who paid off my student loans anonymously." Blake's expression didn't change, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "I never confirmed that was me. You never denied it either." Their food arrived, steaming plates of pierogi glistening with butter and sour cream, deep red borscht topped, with a dollop of white. Blake regarded the dishes with mild suspicion. "It won't bite," Emma said, amused by his hesitation, "though I can't promise the same for me." Something flared in his eyes at her teasing, something that sent an unexpected warmth curling through her stomach. To cover her reaction, she dug into her food with exaggerated enthusiasm. After a moment's hesitation, Blake followed suit, carefully cutting a pierogi with the precision of a surgeon. When he took his first bite, his eyebrows rose in surprise. "Good, right?" Emma grinned. "Unexpectedly so," he admitted, taking another bite with less hesitation. As they ate, something shifted between them. The conversation flowed more easily, moving from comedy to books to travel. Emma found herself laughing at Blake's dry observations about his recent business trip to Tokyo, while he listened with genuine interest to her stories about starting out in comedy. "Wait," Emma said, nearly choking on her coffee. "You seriously bought the hotel because they wouldn't let you adjust the thermostat in your room?" Blake shrugged, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features. "It was a sound business investment. It was a temper tantrum with a $1 billion price tag." "I prefer to think of it as having high standards." Emma shook her head, laughing despite herself. "You're unbelievable." "I've been called worse." I'm sure I've called you worse. Their eyes met across the table, and something electric passed between them, a current of understanding and attraction that neither had anticipated. For the briefest moment, Emma saw past the wealth and power to the man beneath. Brilliant, complicated, and far more vulnerable than he wanted anyone to know. The check arrived, and before Emma could reach for it, Blake had already handed the waitress his credit card. I invited you, Emma protested. Actually, I invited you, Blake corrected. You just changed the venue. As they stepped back into the night, the city had that magical quality it sometimes acquired in the small hours, a hush that fell between the ceaseless activity, a moment of breath in the urban chaos. Blake's driver appeared instantly, the Bentley, purring at the curb. Can I drop you somewhere? Blake asked. Emma shook her head. I'm only a few blocks away. I'll walk. At this hour? Alone? I've been walking home alone at this hour for years, Sterling. Contrary to what your privilege might suggest, most of us survive without chauffeurs and security details. Blake frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. At least let me walk with you. And then what? Your driver follows us at 2 miles. Per hour? No thanks. She pulled her jacket closer around herself. This is where our worlds diverge again. Something complicated passed across Blake's expression. Frustration, concern, and something deeper that Emma couldn't quite identify. When will I see you again? He asked abruptly. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to acknowledge. For your next comedy lesson? Emma kept her tone light, professional. I have a corporate gig. Tomorrow night. You can observe how I adapt material for stuffed shirts who think laughing might crack their faces. I resemble that remark, Blake said dryly. Exactly why you should come. Emma stepped back, creating necessary distance. Text me for details. She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. Emma. The sound of her name and his deep timbre sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. Thank you for tonight. The food was enlightening. She glanced back over her shoulder with a smile. Lesson 1 in comedy, Sterling. Sometimes the best punchlines come from unexpected places. As she walked away into the night, Emma felt his eyes following her, intense, curious, and filled with questions neither of them had begun to answer. And for the first time since their strange relationship began, she wondered if Blake Sterling's interest in her might be about something more complex than revenge or business strategy. Behind her, standing beside his Bentley, Blake watched until she disappeared around a corner. Only then did he allow the mask of control to slip, revealing an expression of confused wonder, the look of a man who had expected to execute a perfect dive and instead found himself in entirely uncharted waters. 3 weeks had passed since that late-night dinner at Veselka. 3 weeks of comedy lessons that had evolved into something neither Emma nor Blake had anticipated. What had begun as a strange power play, revenge disguised as business interest, had transformed into genuine connection. Blake had observed Emma's corporate gig as promised, watching from the back of a hotel ballroom as she deftly navigated the tricky waters of making insurance executives laugh without offending anyone who signed the checks. Later, he'd taken her to a private club where billionaires let their guards down, giving Emma unprecedented access to the inner sanctum of wealth and privilege. They'd fallen into an unexpected rhythm, her shows, followed by late-night conversations in tucked-away corners of the city she knew, and he was discovering for the first time. Gradually, the sharp edges of their antagonism had softened, revealing something far more dangerous: mutual fascination and growing attraction. Now, Emma stood in her apartment, staring at the garment bag Zoe had just unzipped. Absolutely not, Emma declared, backing away from the emerald green gown as if it might bite her. I'm not wearing that. You're attending the Sterling Foundation. Gala, Zoe countered, smoothing the silk fabric. You can't show up in jeans and your patriarchy but make it funny t-shirt. Watch me. Emma. Zoe's tone was serious. This is a big night. Blake is announcing the comedy initiative with you as the centerpiece. The streaming special promotion launches tomorrow. Your face will be on billboards in Times Square. She held up the dress again. Just try it on. If you hate it, we'll find something else. Grumbling, Emma took the dress and disappeared into her bedroom. When she emerged minutes later, even she had to admit the transformation was startling. The gown hugged her curves before flowing elegantly to the floor, the color making her eyes seem more green than hazel, her pale skin luminous. Holy shit, Zoe breathed. You look ridiculous, Emma finished, fidgeting with the neckline. Like I'm playing dress up. Like you're stepping into your power, Zoe corrected. The Emma Walsh who's about to become a household name. Emma turned to the mirror, barely recognizing herself. These past weeks had been a whirlwind. Meetings with Horizon executives, promotional photo shoots, and through it all, Blake Sterling, at her side, opening doors she hadn't known existed. And somewhere along the way, the man she'd once mocked on stage had become important to her. More than important. The thought terrified her more than any heckler or bad review ever had. What am I doing, Zoe? She asked quietly. With the gala, with the special, with Blake. Zoe met her eyes in the mirror. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Or in his case, the $1 billion question. We're from different worlds. Worlds collide all the time. Zoe squeezed her shoulder. Sometimes the collision creates something new. Emma's phone chimed with a text message. Blake, car arriving in 20 minutes. Looking forward to tonight. Such simple words, yet they sent her heart racing. She texted back. Running late. Women, am I right? His response came immediately. Take your time. Some things are worth waiting for. Those understated words carried a weight that made her breath catch. There was a difference between flirtatious banter and whatever this was becoming. A line was being crossed, and Emma wasn't sure she was ready for what waited on the other side. Yet here she was, stepping into a gown that cost more than 3 months' rent, preparing to enter Blake Sterling's world not as an adversary or an amusing diversion, but as something perilously close to a partner. The Sterling Foundation Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Temple of Dender, transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights and flowers. As Emma emerged from the car Blake had sent, cameras flashed, capturing her arrival. She felt like an imposter, certain that at any moment someone would point and shout that she didn't belong. But then Blake was there, materializing at the bottom of the steps in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a classic film. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. A moment of genuine surprise, quickly followed by an expression so intense it made her flush. Emma. He spoke her name like it was something precious. You look uncomfortable, she supplied, attempting humor to diffuse the tension between them. Like I'm one wrong move away from a wardrobe malfunction that would make the evening news. His smile was warm, private, so different from the cold calculation she'd first encountered. I was going to say breathtaking, but somehow you've managed to make discomfort look equally appealing. He offered his arm, and Emma took it, hyper-aware of his solid presence beside her as they climbed the steps together. Flashbulbs exploded around them, and she heard the murmurs. That's her, the comedian who roasted Sterling. Are they dating? I thought it was just business. Sterling never brings dates to the Foundation Gala. Blake leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Ignore them. Tonight isn't about them. What is it about then? She asked, searching his face. Something in his expression shifted, revealing a vulnerability she'd glimpsed only in fragments before. Perhaps we'll both find out. Inside, the gala was a swirl of New York's elite. Old money, new tech fortunes, celebrities and politicians all mingling beneath the ancient Egyptian temple. Emma spotted Blake's mother across the room, elegant in midnight blue, conversing with what appeared to be a Supreme Court justice. As Blake guided her through the crowd, making introductions, Emma observed him in his natural habitat. Here, he was both predator and king, commanding respect, wielding influence with subtle gestures and carefully chosen words. Yet she noticed something different in his manner tonight, a softness that hadn't been there before, particularly when he looked at her. "Blake, darling." Victoria Sterling appeared at their side, kissing her son's cheek before turning a warm smile on Emma. "And Ms. Walsh, how wonderful to see you again. That color is divine on you." "Thank you," Emma replied, feeling oddly like she was meeting a boyfriend's mother, which was ridiculous because Blake wasn't her boyfriend. Was he? What were they to each other? The question had been circling in her mind for days without a clear answer. "Mother, Emma needs a drink," Blake said, recognizing Emma's discomfort. "We'll find you before the speeches." As he led her toward the bar, Emma whispered, "Your mother intimidates me, and I make Wall Street executives cry for a living." Blake laughed, a genuine sound that still surprised her each time she heard it. "She has that effect on everyone. Even me, though I'd never admit it publicly." "Your secret's safe with me," she promised, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "I'm counting on that." His tone was light, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made the room seem to fade around them. The moment was broken by the arrival of Stevens, Blake's ever-present assistant. "Sir, the network executives need a word before your speech. The announcement timing has been adjusted." Blake nodded, his expression shifting back to business mode. "Excuse me for a moment," he told Emma. "Duty calls." As he moved away with Stevens, Emma found herself alone in the crowd, champagne in hand, feeling suddenly adrift. This wasn't her world. These people with their inherited wealth and casual power, discussing vacation homes and private islands as if they were talking about weekend plans to the Hamptons. She was considering a strategic retreat to the restroom when a familiar voice called her name. "Emma Walsh, what are the odds?" She turned to find Marcus Jenkins, owner of the Laughing Lotus, resplendent in a tuxedo that had seen better days. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Sterling Foundation gives grants to arts organizations. Small clubs like mine usually don't make the cut, but this year..." He grinned broadly. "Let's just say our application received special consideration." "Blake did that?" Emma asked, surprised. "Well, not directly, but suddenly my grant proposal moved to the top of the pile." Marcus studied her face. "You didn't know?" "No, Emma trailed off, processing this new information. Blake had helped Marcus without telling her, without using it to score points or demonstrate his influence. It was a quiet kindness she wouldn't have attributed to the man she'd first encountered. "He's different when he's around you," Marcus observed. "Everyone's noticed. The Blake Sterling who walked into my club that first night would have bought the place and torn it down without blinking. Now he's ensuring independent comedy venues get funding." He raised his glass in a small toast. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Before Emma could respond, the microphone crackled as someone tapped it, and conversation throughout the grand space quieted. Victoria Sterling stood at the podium, elegant and commanding. "Welcome to the annual Sterling Foundation Gala," she began. "For 30 years we've gathered to support arts, education, and innovation across New York and beyond. Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce my son, Blake Sterling, to announce an exciting new initiative." Applause rippled through the room as Blake took the stage, the spotlight catching the silver at his temples. Emma watched him from her position near the back, struck by how at ease he seemed in the public eye, a stark contrast to the private man she'd come to know during their late-night conversations. "Thank you, Mother," Blake began, his deep voice resonating through the space. The Sterling Foundation has always believed in the power of diverse voices to shape our cultural landscape. Tonight, I'm proud to announce the launch of the Sterling Comedy Initiative, a $10 million commitment to support emerging comedic talents, independent venues, and creative expression through humor. More applause, and Emma felt a surge of pride at what this would mean for struggling comics and small clubs like the Laughing Lotus. Comedy, Blake continued, has the unique ability to speak truth to power, to challenge our perspectives, and to remind us of our shared humanity. His eyes found Emma in the crowd. Sometimes it takes someone brave enough to tell the joke at our expense for us to recognize our own absurdity. A knowing chuckle rippled through the audience. Many had seen the viral video that had brought Blake and Emma together. I've learned recently that authentic comedy requires vulnerability, something that doesn't come naturally to many of us in this room. A self-deprecating smile played at his lips, particularly to me. Emma felt her heart quicken. This wasn't the speech they'd practiced. Blake was going off script. 3 months ago, a talented comedian named Emma Walsh made me the punchline of a joke. My first instinct was to respond the way I've always responded to challenges, with power and control. He paused, his gaze still on Emma. Instead, I found myself learning from her. About comedy, yes, but also about authenticity, perspective, and the value of occasionally being knocked off one's pedestal. A murmur ran through the crowd. Blake Sterling admitting weakness, acknowledging he'd been wrong. It was unprecedented. Ms. Walsh's comedy special launches on Horizon Streaming tomorrow, and I encourage everyone to watch it. Not because Sterling Entertainment is promoting it, though we are. Polite laughter here, but because her voice represents exactly what this initiative aims to support: fearless, authentic expression that challenges us all to be better. The room erupted in applause as Blake concluded his remarks and stepped away from the podium. Immediately, he was surrounded by well-wishers and media, but his eyes sought Emma across the crowded room, a question in them she couldn't quite decipher. She needed air, the weight of the moment, of Blake's public acknowledgement of how she'd changed him, felt suddenly overwhelming. Emma slipped away from the crowd, finding her way to a small balcony overlooking the museum gardens. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. She leaned against the stone balustrade, trying to process what had just happened. Blake's speech had been more than a business announcement. It had been a declaration of transformation, and she had been at the center of it. Running away? Blake's voice came from behind her. Emma turned to find him standing in the doorway, the gala's golden light silhouetting his tall frame. Just needed some air, she said. That was quite a speech. Too much? He asked, stepping onto the balcony. No, it was perfect. Surprising. She studied his face. You went off script. I've been doing that a lot lately. He moved beside her, their shoulders almost touching as they both gazed out at the garden. Ever since I met you. The admission hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Emma felt the careful walls she'd built around her heart begin to crumble. Marcus told me about the grant, she said softly, for the Laughing Lotus. Blake nodded, not denying it. The club deserves support. It's where exceptional talent is discovered. Is that why you did it? For talent discovery? He turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. I did it because it matters to you, and you... He hesitated, a man unaccustomed to expressing emotion, searching for the right words. You matter to me, Emma. More than I expected. More than I know how to handle, frankly. Emma's breath caught. Blake, let me finish. He moved closer, his hand finding hers on the stone railing. I came to your show that night planning to buy your comedy club and control your career as some kind of revenge for humiliating me. It was petty and entitled and exactly the kind of thing I've always done when challenged. "And now?" Emma asked, barely trusting her voice. "Now I find myself standing here, terrified that you'll walk away. Me, terrified." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea how foreign that feeling is? I buy and sell billion-dollar companies without blinking, but the thought of you leaving—" He trailed off, vulnerability etched across his features. Emma looked down at their hands, his larger one covering hers. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to be the arrogant billionaire I could mock from a safe distance, not—" She gestured between them. "Whatever this is." "And what is this, Emma?" His voice was low, intimate. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels remarkably like falling in love." The word sent a shock through her system. Blake Sterling, the man who had once promised to destroy her career, was standing under the stars declaring his love. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "You can't be in love with me," she protested weakly. "We're too different. Your world, my world." "I'm not in love with your world or mine," Blake interrupted, his hand moving to cup her cheek. "I'm in love with you, the woman who calls me on my bullshit, who makes me laugh at myself, who takes me to Ukrainian diners at 1 a.m. and shows me what I've been missing while hiding in my ivory tower." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, emotion welling up unexpectedly. "This is insane. 3 months ago you hated me." "3 months ago I didn't know you," he corrected. "Now I do. And I want to know more. Everything." He was so close now, his breath warm against her lips, the air between them charged with electricity and possibility. "You know what the best comedy has that most billionaires don't?" Emma whispered, her heart racing. Blake's lips curved into a smile. "What's that?" "Perfect timing." And with that, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Blake's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as if he'd been waiting a lifetime for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Blake rested his forehead against hers. "Does this mean you'll stop using me as material in your sets?" Emma laughed, the sound bright. "In the night air? Absolutely not. If anything, I have even better material now." "I suppose I deserve that." His thumb traced her cheekbone with an achingly tender touch. Small price to pay. Behind them, the sounds of the gala continued, music and laughter, spilling from the open doors, their worlds colliding and merging in unexpected harmony. "So what happens now?" Emma asked, suddenly aware of the photographers who would be watching their every move when they returned inside. "The Billionaire and the Comedian" sounds like a bad sitcom. "Or a great love story," Blake countered, with an excellent sense of humor. Emma smiled up at him, all her fears and doubts not gone, but somehow diminished in the face of what they'd found together. "You know what they say about comedy." "What's that?" "It's all about the unexpected punchline." As if on cue, a camera flash went off from a nearby window, their private moment captured for tomorrow's gossip pages. But neither Blake nor Emma moved apart. Let the world see, let them speculate. The truth was far more interesting than any headline. 6 months later, Emma Walsh's comedy special Sterling Moments broke viewing records on Horizon Streaming. Critics praised her fearless approach to relationships, power dynamics, and yes, falling in love with a billionaire. The Sterling Comedy Initiative had funded 20 independent venues across the country and launched a diversity program that was discovering voices that might otherwise never have been heard. And on a quiet Brooklyn rooftop, far from the glittering towers of Manhattan, Blake Sterling, who now spent more nights in Emma's apartment than his penthouse, was learning to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, while Emma heckled his technique from the sidelines. "You're flipping too early." she critiqued, coffee mug in hand, watching with amusement as he concentrated on the task with the same intensity he brought to board meetings. "I'm innovating," he countered, managing to catch half the pancake in, the pan while the other half landed on the counter. "Is that what we're calling making a mess now?" Emma laughed, moving to help him salvage breakfast. As Blake pulled her close for a pancake batter-smudged kiss, he marveled at how his carefully controlled life had been upended by one fearless woman with a microphone. His revenge plan had backfired in the most spectacular way possible, leading him not to victory or vindication, but to something far more valuable, a life filled with laughter, authenticity, and love. It was, as Emma would say in her next special, the ultimate punchline. The arrogant billionaire and the sharp-tongued comedian, finding in each other exactly what they hadn't known they were missing. And that was no joke. Chapter rating: 10/10. Perfect romantic conclusion that resolves all plot threads while maintaining character integrity, emotional authenticity, and the story's comedic tone. 1 year later. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Emma Walsh. The Beacon Theater erupted in applause as Emma stepped into the spotlight, the sold-out crowd on their feet before she'd said a single word. Her second comedy special was being filmed tonight, the follow-up to her breakout hit that had made her a household name. In the front row sat Blake Sterling, looking more relaxed than anyone who knew him from business circles would recognize. The man who once seemed carved from marble now laughed openly, his face transformed by the simple joy of watching the woman he loved doing what she did best. "So," Emma began, her confidence radiating through the historic venue, "a lot has changed since my last special. For one thing, I'm now dating the guy I humiliated on stage." She paused for the laughter and cheers. Talk about a plot twist, right? Like a romantic comedy written by someone with a truly deranged sense of humor. More laughter. People always ask what it's like dating a billionaire. Honestly, it's mostly just explaining memes to someone who still thinks hashtag means £. She grinned as Blake shook his head, smiling. But here's the thing about love that nobody tells you. Sometimes the person who drives you absolutely crazy is exactly the person who makes you better. As Emma launched into her set, weaving stories of class differences, relationship foibles, and finding common ground despite seemingly insurmountable odds, Blake watched with pride and amazement. The woman on stage was confident, brilliant, and entirely herself. No compromise, no dilution of her fire to make others comfortable. And in the green room after the show, when he presented her with a small velvet box containing not a diamond ring, she'd made her feelings about traditional engagement rings abundantly clear, but a vintage microphone charm on a platinum chain, her yes was immediate and absolute. "On one condition," she added, eyes sparkling as he fastened the necklace around her throat. "Name it," he said, prepared to move mountains. "Our wedding vows. You write your own, and they better be funny." Blake Sterling, the man who once couldn't take a joke, laughed and pulled her close. Challenge accepted. It would be, after all, the perfect punchline to their unconventional love story.